Please pray with me. Dear God, I can't do this without you. I just ask that you come into this place, fill it with your presence. If I have written down anything that's worth listening to, God, I just ask that you open their hearts, open their ears to receive your word. God, prepare us, make us hungry to know you better, and then satisfy that hunger. Amen. See if this sounds familiar. You live your life. You try to be a good person. You go to church sometimes. You have a general sense of what's right or wrong. Maybe you don't read your Bible every day, but you know what's expected. You know what it means to be a good person. Maybe not entirely on some of the gray areas, but for the most part, you know what's right and you know what's wrong. But there is someone in your life who is doing something that's wrong. Now, if it's a little thing, we tend to let it slide. We don't want to make waves. In fact, we barely even think about it. We have gotten really good at pretending that there's nothing happening. There's not actually any problem. But for the bigger issues, we feel like we should speak up. There's this sense that we have a responsibility, especially if it's family. You know, kids and get into high school, they start to experiment sexually. There's getting into trouble with alcohol or drugs. Husband or wife is not showing up to work. Maybe they're depressed or something. Abusive relationships, family problems, gambling problems, work problems, drinking problems, bad money decision problems, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, father, mother, cousin, whatever. When someone around us does something wrong or is doing something wrong, we feel like we should speak up. We feel like we have this obligation to say something. But there is one phrase, one string of words that paralyzes us more than any other. It's not my place. It's not my place to reach into their life. We want to help. We want to make a difference in the world. We want to say something. We want to do something, but I'm just not sure if it's my place. So what do we do instead? We gossip. We turn to the person next to us and we talk to them about the person. Or we talk to them about the problem, but we never talk to the person about the problem. Does this sound familiar? This is what we do. We turn to one another and we have this extremely hands-off approach to community. You've heard the stories. If I mention it, if I bring it up, it's only going to make things worse. If I set boundaries for my children concerning alcohol or sex or drugs, they're going to freak out and go the other way. They'll walk away from me. That's the big fear, isn't it? That they will walk away from me. If I push my husband about his drinking, if I push my wife about her spending habits, if I speak up, if I give a hint that I have an opinion, that I care, that I worry, that I disagree, they might walk away from me. And to be honest, it's true. That's what will happen. If we do it the wrong way, they will walk away. That's the world we live in right now. There's no commitment anymore. There's no socially binding contract in our communities. It has never been easier to walk away from your problems, ever. It's never been easier, and I'm really saddened by that. I don't like that, but that's the reality. And so we hide. We hide inside the words, "It's not my place." It's not my place, and that keeps us satisfied. Today is the final sermon in our series, Rise of the Underdog. For the most part, what we have seen in the last couple of weeks is that God is the answer for just about every problem we are having. For every excuse that we use to try and stay in the shadows, to stay out of the spotlight, to refuse to rise, God has a reason to bring us back into the light. Everything we say, "I'm not good enough," or "I'm not as good as they are," of course you're not. But with God, that shouldn't matter. Well, I don't know what to say. Of course you don't. But with God, that shouldn't matter. Well, I don't know how. Of course you don't. But with the community around you and God, that shouldn't matter. And so in figuring out, in our search to figure out how to rise in our world, what we have found is that it's not about what we can do. It's about a God who is bigger than us and reaches into our lives, and learning to lean on God instead of ourselves. We are not meant to be beaten by the world. We are not meant to be overcome or crushed or defeated. We are not designed to cower. We were made to rise. We are God's children, and our God is an awesome God. We were made to rise. You are the underdog, and this life is your story. And so for the last piece of this sermon series, we're going to look at one of the greatest underdogs in history. Not a man, but a young woman by the name of Esther. And so we get into the text for today, and what we find is that this is kind of a complicated story with a lot of moving pieces. Now, in this sermon series, we've kind of jumped all around the Old Testament history, and I'm sorry about that. That's a little confusing. But this story actually comes very late in Israel's history. So the kingdom of Israel has been conquered. They have been defeated. They turned away from God. They turned away from the way that they were supposed to be living, and so God let another country come in and take over. And what that country did, it was the empire of Persia, and what they did is they came in and they took all the people and they deported them. It's called exile. They exiled them away from their homes and they forced them to work as servants or slaves in the kingdom of Persia. So the entire Jewish population is now living away from home, living in the kingdom of Persia, serving as servants or slaves. Now, over time, they get to a place where they're almost equals. They're treated as like kind of secondary citizens, but they found this sort of peace. But it's not their home. It's not where they want to be. And so we open this story on the kingdom of Persia with King Xerxes. Now, after a while, they live peacefully, but we open on the kingdom of Persia with King Xerxes. Now King Xerxes is not necessarily a bad king, but he's a little bit unstable. And when he gets angry, he becomes unpredictable, and that makes him dangerous. In the first 2 chapters, King Xerxes has this big party, and he gets just completely drunk. And then he demands that the queen come out and show everyone how beautiful she is. And of course, the queen refuses because, sexism. And so the king banishes her from the kingdom forever. He says, "You're not the queen anymore. Get out of my kingdom." And his kingdom was huge. So she refused, and he banished her. And so now the king needs a new wife. Anybody want to sign up for that? After this guy just got drunk and banished her? I mean, who wants to be that? And so the king sends servants out into his kingdom, into his empire, looking for a new wife, and they find Esther, a beautiful young Jewish woman. And the king loved her, and so he declared that she was the new queen. Almost overnight, without warning, Esther suddenly thrust into this position of power and influence that maybe she was completely unprepared for. Maybe she never wanted that. But that's what happened, and that's where she was. But now we got to leave Esther for a little moment and introduce a few more characters like Haman and Mordecai. Now, Haman is the king's right-hand man. He's a very important person. He's like the chief advisor. He's the helper to the king. He's very influential and powerful, but he's also very jealous. Haman is actually a very small man. He can't handle it when other people are the center of attention. Everything needs to be about Haman. Haman's kind of a sad character. Now, the other guy is Mordecai, Esther's cousin Mordecai, who actually, Mordecai's a lot older than Esther, and when Esther's parents died, Mordecai adopted Esther. So Mordecai, he's her cousin, but he's really more like a father figure to Esther, and so he's like her dad. Now, Mordecai was a good servant. He was faithful and dutiful, and he was working one day, and he overheard some guards plotting to assassinate the king. Now, long story short, Mordecai tells Esther, Esther tells the king, they investigate the assassination attempt. Turns out it's true, Mordecai's a hero. They save the king, they even write about him in one of the history books. But now remember Haman, the right-hand man who needs all the credit and needs all the glory. Haman and Mordecai, they don't get along. And so at one point, Haman tries to get Mordecai to bow down and show him the proper respect. Because remember, Haman is like some kind of celebrity, right? And Mordecai is nobody. He's just a Jewish servant. He doesn't matter. He's nobody. And so he tries to get Mordecai to bow down and show me the proper respect. But Mordecai refuses. He says, "No, I don't bow down to anyone except God." And so Haman is furious, and he's set out to destroy Mordecai. And we get to chapter 3, verse 5. And it says, when Haman saw that Mordecai would not bow down or show him respect, he was filled with rage. And he had learned of Mordecai's nationality, so he decided that it was not enough to lay hands on Mordecai alone. Instead, he looked for a way to destroy all the Jews throughout the entire empire of Xerxes. Okay, so Haman, instead of dealing with Mordecai man to man, he decides, I'm going to destroy all the Jewish people. And so he's officially graduated from like sniveling, jealous little punk to like James Bond villain / Nazi, kill all the Jews, right? So Haman goes to the king, does his thing, silver-tongued fox style, whispers into the ear of the king. And he convinces the king that there is a whole group of people out there who are evil, and they hate the king, and they are dangerous, and they all need to die. And so he gets the king to sign an edict that declaring that all Jews will be killed. And it's about a year later. He says, a year from now, we're going to kill all the Jews. You see why I say this is kind of complicated, right? It's a mess. And so that's where our scripture lesson comes in. That's when we step into the story in chapter 3, verse 13. And it says, dispatches were sent by swift messengers into all the provinces of the empire, giving the order that all Jews, young and old, including women and children, must be killed, slaughtered, and annihilated on a single day. Did you get all that? Killed, slaughtered, and annihilated, in case one verb wasn't enough for you. And so now it seems like it's a pretty good time for the Jews to start panicking. And chapter 4 starts when Mordecai learned about all that had been done. He tore his clothes. He put on burlap and ashes, and he went out into the city crying with a loud and bitter wail. So Mordecai's kind of making a scene, right? He's like, I'm going to make a wail, and he's wearing like a bag, like a burlap sack, and he's covered in ashes. He's all dirty and gross, and he's wailing, which is like the most awkward and socially unacceptable exclamation there is, right? Now, I don't mind yelling, right? You get some angry yelling, you get some chanting, you get some happy yelling, you get cheering. I can deal with all that. But wailing? Wailing makes me uncomfortable. I don't know about you guys. I mean, children are the only ones who are allowed to wail, right? I mean, this is a grown man walking through the streets wailing. That's awkward. And it made Esther uncomfortable too. And in chapter 4, verse 4, it says, when Queen Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai, she was deeply distressed. And so she sent clothing to him to replace the burlap, but he refused it. So Esther's response to the genocide of her people, the potential genocide, is, here's some clothes. Mordecai, knock it off. Cover up. You're embarrassing me. Mordecai, no, it's not that big a deal. Maybe if we cover it up and it'll go away all by itself. Maybe if we don't pay attention to the problem. It is so easy and so tempting to just ignore an issue, to pretend like you don't see what the real problem is. Do you feel that echo between the story of Esther and our lives here and now? How many times in our lives have we thought, maybe if I just don't look at it, maybe if I just cover up the problem, it'll go away? That's what Esther thought. She thought, I can't do this. I can't do anything about this. And Mordecai tells her, you're the queen. You're the queen. You have to go talk to the king, say something, do anything. But remember, there's kind of this weird thing. Apparently in this kingdom, there's a certain way that you have to approach the king. And if you do it wrong, they will kill you, right? And so if you speak up, if you approach the king uninvited, he's got this gold scepter thing. And if you walk up to the king and you start talking and he didn't invite you, he's got this gold scepter and he has to hold it out to you or they will kill you. If the king doesn't like what you say, he's not going to hold the scepter out, and they'll kill you, okay? So she explains to Mordecai. She explains this whole thing, and she's like, I can't do it. I might die. Mordecai, I could die, like dead. This could end my life. Mordecai. And then verse 13 is Mordecai's response. And he says, don't think for a moment, because you're in the palace, that you will escape when all the other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows? Perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this. I love that line. He says, look, God's going to get it done. God is going to protect his people with you or without you. But that last sentence, perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this. Maybe this complicated story, this weird path that your life has taken, maybe that's on purpose. Maybe you are where you are on purpose. Maybe God has a plan in all of this. Again, do you hear the echoes of God into our lives for today? This is pretty cool, right? You are where you are on purpose. And so Esther decides to give it a shot. She says, okay, yes, I will go before the king, and if I die, then I die. And so she invites the king and Haman, the right-hand man, to come over for dinner. And I'll cook some dinner, and then maybe we can talk about something. And in her mind, she's thinking, maybe we can talk about not committing genocide against my people. Sounds good, right? Come on over, no pressure, we're just going to have some dinner. And so she cooks the dinner. And the king comes over, and Haman comes over, and Haman's feeling pretty good because he got invited to the dinner between the king and the queen, and it's a pretty big deal. And the moment comes where she could tell the king everything. That moment comes, and she chickens out. She couldn't do it. The king actually asks her, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? I'll do anything, even if it's half my kingdom, I will give it to you. And she chickens out. She couldn't do it. In chapter 5, verse 7, Esther replied, "This is my request and my deepest wish. If I have found favor with the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my request and do what I ask, please come with Haman tomorrow to a banquet that I will prepare for you. Then I will explain what this is all about." So close. She had the moment. She could have brought up the issue that was on her heart, the thing she wanted to talk about the most, this important topic. She needed to bring it up, and she chickened out. She was afraid. She couldn't go for the goal, so she punted the ball down the field. Come back tomorrow. I can't do it. Come back tomorrow. And I get it. She was scared. She wanted to tell the king, but this is not going to be a fun conversation for her. And so she couldn't do it. But the food must have been really good because the king agrees. He says, "Sure, I'll come back tomorrow. No problem." And so that might be a little tip for us. If you got to talk to someone about something that's really touchy, have really good food available, right? I mean, maybe that's what we're supposed to learn here. So the king comes back the next day. And we get to chapter 7, and we're back. We got dinner, we got the king, we got the bad guy Haman, we got Esther, and the moment comes again, and this time she does it. She gets that courage, she steps forward, the king lowers his scepter, and she tells him all about Haman's plot to kill the Jews, and the king responds. And so instead of killing the Jews, the king has Haman killed in the way that he was planning on killing the Jews. I think they pronounce that karma? Or in the Christian world, we just call that justice. But what I want you to see, but I want you to catch is that it took 2 tries. Esther failed. It took fear, failure, retreat, and then courage to get it done. But Esther persevered, and she saved the entire people of Israel. In a world controlled by men, the unexpected underdog was the young queen, and she saves the day. Now, I know there's a lot of moving pieces to this story. There's lots of characters and such, but what I found this past week is that God is in the details. Now, you can double check me on this. I heard it, and I haven't personally looked, but I read this last week. The name God is not in the book of Esther at all. They never mention God in the entire book of Esther. In all the other stories of the underdogs in this whole sermon series, it's very obvious that God was working because there was a character named God and he did stuff, right? It was really easy. In the story of King David, we got God talking to Samuel. In the story, God touched Jeremiah's lips and he gave him the words to speak. God was in the burning bush. God performed miracles with Moses. God was obvious. But in the story of Esther, God is in the details. God is not obvious. He's not a character in the story. And I think, in a way, that makes this the most relatable story in our entire sermon series. This is how God prefers to work in our lives. With the rare exception, God doesn't really do the burning bush thing so much anymore. If he's done that for you, you are so lucky. That would be so cool to see. But he doesn't work that way in our lives. He prefers to work in the background, to work in the details of our lives. God is in the detail. We see it in Esther's position as queen, but there's a deeper level that we haven't seen yet. Do you remember how she chickened out? She chickened out and she said, "Come back the next day." That night, the king couldn't sleep. Do you guys know about this? This is chapter 6. This is so cool. Okay, so Esther chickens out, right? On, let's say Friday night. She says, "Come back Saturday night." That night, the king couldn't sleep. He couldn't fall asleep. And so he orders one of his servants to go grab a history book, bring it in and read me the history book, because what's a better way to knock yourself out than have a servant read you a history book? I mean, the jokes write themselves at that point. Anyway, so the king's listening to the history, and he just happens to hear the story of how Mordecai saved his life. On the night after Esther chickens out, on that night, the night between the dinners, the king just happened to have trouble sleeping. And the servant just happened to grab that history book. And he just happened to read that story in that history book about a faithful Jewish servant who saved his life. They never mention the name of God in the book of Esther, but he is stamped all over this book. Do you see how cool this is? And they never mention the name of God. The good news for us today is that God is in the details. He is always there, even if we don't see him. In our lives, God is always working in and around us. From the cosmic level of universes colliding all the way down to the microscopic level, God is in the details. And so our response is to follow the example of Esther, try and then try again. Let me say that again. Try and then try again. No offense to Yoda, who said, do or do not. There is no try. There is a try. Okay? Esther says, try and then try again. How many of you have ever tried to help somebody and failed? Yeah, okay, we got some hands. We tried to talk to someone about their drug problem or their alcohol problem or how they need to get off the couch and get a job or how their gossiping is hurting others. Have you ever tried to help somebody and you made things worse? You failed, and now you don't want to talk about that issue. You avoid it. I don't want to deal with it. I don't know what to do. The story of Esther teaches us that that sometimes when we try to help, we will fail. Sometimes when we try to help, we will fail. Maybe we'll get scared. Maybe we'll say the wrong thing, or we'll say the right thing, but in the wrong way or at the wrong moment. The message that we find in these words is not get it right the first time. That's not what this story tells us. You don't have to get it right the first time. The message, that's too much pressure. That paralyzes us. We would never do anything because we are afraid to fail. But the message of Esther is try and then try again. There is no failure when it comes to relationships. There is only the first try and then the next try and then the next try. When one method doesn't work, we try another. We're not perfect people who get it right the first time. I want to give you permission this morning to fail. Okay? I want you to get out there this week and fail. Fail. Then repent. Come back, ask for forgiveness, fix it, and then try again. We are broken people. We are going to fail. We are going to make mistakes. We will hurt. We will slip up. But as people of grace, because God loves us, and he forgave all of our sins, not just the first ones we did, but every sin, every single time we screw up, we can come back to God. And if God keeps forgiving us, and he keeps giving us second chances, then we can keep trying, keep working and trying to figure out how to love the people around us. Try and then try again. It's not my place. You know what? You're right. It's not your place to reach into someone else's life. It's not your place to tell other people what to do. It is not your place until you make it your place. Let me show you what I mean. We talk about this a lot here at Wesley. You cannot be effective in transforming a stranger. You can't be effective in changing someone's house if you don't know them. If you want to help someone, you need a foundation of love and respect before people will listen to you. A stranger yelling on the street corner is not going to help anyone. If you want to help someone, you have to build a foundation of trust. And don't just tell them that you love them. Show them. Serve them. Love them. If you want to reach someone, we have to get past the walls that they are going to throw up in defense. It is not your place until you make it your place. We have to take that first step. We have to step boldly into vulnerability. We have to put ourselves out there. Esther put herself out there. We have to make that first step before we can make a real difference in someone's life. The application is to remember it's not your place until you make it your place by loving people, serving them, and stepping boldly into vulnerability. The second part of our application is what I call the teammate approach. For a really long time, the church has been modeling after the king-servant approach. See, we here in the church, we are the king. We know everything, right? We have all the answers. We have the Bible, and we will tell you what to do. We will tell you how to live your life. We are the boss, you are the servant. But that model doesn't work anymore. People don't trust the church. People think that all we're going to do is judge them, and they feel like we are against them, that all we're trying to do is tell them what to do. Think about Esther. If Esther had just stormed into that throne room and tried to tell the king what to do, would that have worked? No. She'd probably be exiled with that other queen. But think about how she did it. She had dinner with the king. She served him. She worked with him, next to him. In our lives, if you want to make a difference, if you want to change someone's heart, you can't judge them. You can't be against them. You have to come in alongside them. We have to serve others to show them our heart. The king-servant approach doesn't work, but the teammate approach does. We reach out to others. I'm not against you. I'm not judging you. I am in this with you. Now, this is something our media has not figured out because it's so easy to slide into slander, right? To slide into hatred, and I'm going to yell at you and angry. It's easier to revert to anger and name-calling, and I will tell you how you're wrong. But that doesn't work. That doesn't convince anybody ever. That's not a real conversation because they are not listening. It doesn't change their heart. It doesn't convince them. To start the conversation, we have to deny ourselves, serve others, love them first, show them who you are, that we are broken people trying to figure out this life thing together. That's what God teaches us. God gives us a better way than what the world does. Isn't God amazing? I mean, God is so cool. He just shows us all this incredible stuff. And so we rise and rise again. There is an underdog in each of us. Like David, we don't compare ourselves to others because that doesn't help. Like Jeremiah, we trust that God will give us the words. Like Moses, we turn to the community around us to support us and to help us. And like Esther, we try and try again. We do not give up, and we trust that God will work in the details. With all of those pieces to the underdog story, you can change the course of history. You can change the world. You could take something insignificant like one simple life and turn it into something significant. A revolution starts with a simple spark. And so I'll leave you with this. May you try and try again. May you step boldly into vulnerability in reaching out to other people. May you come alongside people with a teammate approach to serve them, to love them, and then to trust God to work in the details. Amen.